So I was hoping that Krishna would give me some chutti. But if you know the Bhagavad Gita, he says very clearly that I never rest. So even it was a kind of reaction against the kind of yoga, of total, as we have discussed before, inactivity. And that's why he says, I myself never rest, so the beings also never rest. But what is his closest definition of yoga in the Gita? Karmasu kaushalam. Skillfulness in action. And it's one of the most beautiful definitions of yoga. And kaushalam, of course, in Buddhism also, it has a very important significance, what it means, kushala, kaushala. It's not just skillfulness like any worker is able to do his work, but it means something beneficial and liberating. An action which is kushala is a liberating, is a salvific action, is a beneficial action. So karma sukhaushalam. So in that sense we are celebrating Janmashtami also by honoring his definition of yoga. And I would suggest, if you don't mind, to have the afternoon free, at least in that way. Whether it's raining or not raining, it doesn't matter, but have the afternoon free, so I can also go to the doctor and do some. Now, what is so wonderful in this tradition, and it again and again happens to me and to others spontaneously, that you study something, then you experience something, then you read something else, and suddenly all these things come together and complement each other and explain each other, and it was not intended. Yesterday when I read this piece by that anonymous guru about mantra, and in the evening we heard Swamiji on mantra, and today the same topic is coming up in the text, and it's not that I have planned it like this, but it just happens. And maybe for those who are not so familiar with the tradition, I should repeat or revise a little bit what we have heard last evening. I think it would be useful. So the mantra is still there. And he starts explaining a verse on addressed to Ganesha, and Ganesha with this whole symbolism of the 9 doors. CD.
No, the same thing which you're reading. There's one line on the.
Acha.
Yeah.
You take this. Sorry. I'm not.
Which page is that?
That verse on Ganesha is the different place. This Om Tumsa, and the explanation is on page 21, but the Ganesha mantra is somewhere else. So I'm not even sure, it must be from the... yes, let me give you the background. There are different tantras in Kashmir Shaivism which are very popular and authoritative, and among them, and each tantra has its own mantra. its own deity and its own mantra. Now the tantra from which this mantra is taken is Netra Tantra. So Netra Tantra, of course, it means the eye, and eye in relation to Shiva, of course, means the third eye. And the Lord or the deity, the form of Shiva worshipped in that Tantra is called either Netra Mata, the Lord of the third eye, or Amriteshvara Bhairava, the Lord of immortality. And as we had heard on the first day, His Holiness reciting the Mahamrityunjaya mantra. Of course, that is also addressed to Shiva as overcomer of death. And Amriteshvara Bhairava is another form of Shiva as the Lord of immortality, means the one who overcomes death. And there is a beautiful symbolism. Of course, our old ever the same Kshemaraja, he gives a beautiful commentary on the Netra Tantra, where he goes into the whole symbolism of the eye, with analyzing all the parts of the physical eye and giving it esoteric significance. It's a beautiful passage. Sanderson has translated that. So Netra is taken in its full symbolic sense. And then the mantra revealed in the Netra Tantra is what we have heard yesterday, but you will not find it anywhere in the Tantra. It is only indicated. And this is in all the Tantras, the mantra is never expressed. It is just hinted. So you get a hint, and you have to derive it. So either you are in the tradition and then you are able to uncode, as we have all these computer codes, and the tantras have their own code language, and then you can uncode this code, or you have to have a master who is in the tradition and who does it for you. Of course, nowadays we have all texts and published works and things are already explained and so on, but originally it is all hidden. So you will not find that mantra anywhere in the Netra Tantra except by hints. And then, as Swamiji has done, he always made us recite the mantra with the explanation. And his approach to mantra was always one that mantras have meaning. Because there was a lot of discussion, even among scholars, a mantra is meaningless and just some abracadabra, some syllables which don't mean anything and have some magic and so on. But Swamiji was always insisting mantras have meaning. And it may not be a lexical meaning, but they have meaning. And that is why he gave a lot of importance to the explanation of each syllable and each word of the mantra. So already the explanation of Om is of course a universal bija mantra, which is used in all the Indian traditions and given different meanings. Like in the Vedic, Upanishadic, Om is given another meaning, and here in the Shaiva it's given another meaning, but they are not contradictory, they are just complementary. And the meaning of Om is so beautiful. It is that great reality, Shaiva Dharma, which is the Dharma means both the abode and also the reality of the Shaiva reality, Shiva's reality, luminous. Dharma is always something luminous, in which which is full, which is dense with consciousness and bliss, Chittananda Ghana, and in which all the elements of the universe are merged. Antaralina, that's why we always, when we start this reciting this explanation, Antaralina Tattvokam, you know, that reducing that whole multiplicity of the entire universe in one syllable, then it is in Om. Antaralina Tattvokam. This is that total, all-embracing nature of that one syllable Om. Then Jun and
Could you repeat the last line? After consciousness and bliss, dense with consciousness and bliss.
Chit Ananda Ghana. It is, yeah, and then Yattattvam Shaiva Dharmakyam. That reality which is the abode of Shiva, or the Dharman, the light-filled presence of Shiva, you can also say. That is called Om. And then Jun, of course many of these bija mantras, you find them again in Tibetan Buddhism, and very far, even up to Japan. Some of the Sanskrit bija aksharas, even that lipi, that script, you know, the Chittam, the calligraphy. This Lokesh Chandra, he has collected these Japanese calligraphy, but even of the Sanskrit, the Chittam script. So these mantras, these bija, we have this.
Yeah, this front of the
Outside.
outside. Door.
Yeah. So in the beautiful Japanese calligraphy, which that kind of calligraphy you don't find in India, but the same mantras, same bijas, so they have traveled very far. Tremendous influence.
And on the side,
So
on the side of the temple, there are
yeah, of course, and these are these compacted mantras. So that Chittam script has transported those mantras. So Jum is also one of those bija mantras, which originally it denotes the Shakti. And that energy, Tadrik Atma Parama Shashalini, who is capable of self-reflection. So this is again what we have said about Vimarsha, that the ultimate reality is not only Prakasha, it's also Vimarsha, and Vimarsha is Shakti. And Vimarsha means Atma Paramasha Shalini, she who is capable of self-reflection. And who is free from the limitations of space, time, form, etc. Desha Kala Aparichina Satjum Shaktena Katyate. And then Om Jum Saha again means an aspect of Shakti, or rather of the three Shaktis. Sisriksha, Ulleka, Nirmana. This is a description of the three Shaktis, Icha, Jnana, Kriya, that Swamiji has beautifully explained. Sisriksha means the desire to create. Ulleka means the plan to. Ulleka means the drawing. If you make a building, you know, you need a plan. And actual nirmana, the actual building of that is the Kriya Shakti. So, Icha Shakti, Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti, these three are meant here. Tritaya. She who is filled, nirbhara, with all these three Shaktis, and who is Jagato Yeshita Shakti, who is the ruler, feminine, I don't know how you say ruler and feminine, the empress of the three, of the world. And she who is the ruler is Svadhan Kriya Shakti. So she contains all these three, Icha, Jnana and Kriya. And she is denoted by the bija Sa. And then Om Jum Saha Amriteshvara. So Amriteshvara is described Svashakti Abhivyakti Mayi Mokshe Asya Ishvarya Yogata, who is ever intent on bestowing liberation on his worshippers, Upasakanam, and who is manifesting his own energy, Svashakti Abhivyakti. Asya Aishvarya Yogata means he has that power to bestow liberation on his worshippers, and liberation means Amriteshvaratvam, means immortality, the state of immortality. Om Chumsa Amriteshvara, now Bhairava. Now we know from the Vijnana Bhairava that there are so many, Vijnana Bhairava gives one interpretation of Bhairava, but in the Tantras you find so many so-called etymologies of Bhairava, which are actually interpretations of his name and of his essence and of his being. And you know this book by Kaas on Nirvachana tradition? He has 60 pages, and it's a purely linguistic book, 60 pages only on the etymology of Bhairava, from the different tantras and Abhinavagupta and so on. So it is a very a word which has great weight in this tradition. Nila Hashadi Vedena Yat Bahya Bhyantaram Jagat Aham iti Amrisham Purno Bhairava Samudahita. Who is called Bhairava? Who is filled with the Aham iti Amrisham, with the reflection of Aham. So the true nature of Bhairava is Aham, is the true I consciousness. The ultimate I consciousness is Aham. But it's not an I consciousness in contraposition or in contrast to the objective. In our normal awareness we have I and this, Aham, Idam, but not in his case. He is pure fullness of Aham, which contains the whole universe, both external and internal, Bahya Bhyantaram Jagat, which is distinguished as external objects, means the example always is given as blue, for external objects, and for internal sensations, harsha, that happiness. So Nila Harsha always stands for external objects and internal sensations. So he is the fullness of all these external and internal realities constituting the world, and in the full reflectivity of I consciousness, Aham, Iti Amrisham, Purna Bhairava Sama, fullness. And then Namaha. We do so much in every tradition, you know, we do our pranam, our namaskara, and our namaha, Om Namah Shivaya, to all different deities or enlightened beings, or the Guru Namaha. What does it really mean? Deha prana sukadinam nyakbhavat bhakta samhati. Yachidatmani Vishvantya Namah Shabdena Suchyate. It's very beautiful. the word Namaha, homage, praise, means to rest in pure consciousness, Chitta Mantra, to find repose in pure consciousness. And what Deha Prana Sukhadinam Nyakbhavat Bhakta Samadhi. First you have to reduce your ego or your pride and your identification with the body, with the prana, with your emotional states and so on. Nyakbhavat, making them bow down. See, what has to bow down? It is not the true aham, which is already Bhairava, but what has to bow down, what has to be homage, has to be humiliated, is our sense of identification with the body, with the prana, with our emotions, with our different states, and that has to bow down. And all this has to find rest, Vishranti, in the pure consciousness, Chidatmani Vishranti, and that is Namaha. It's beautiful. Whenever you express Om Namah Shivaya or anything, or Namah to any deity, it is that inner, first reducing your limitations and then letting them all rest in pure consciousness. That is Namaha. So the last verse I'm not explaining because Swamiji has done it very extensively and he goes into all his aksharas and the matrikas and so on. This, he has done it very. And then at the end there is, at the end of the CD, on what we are reciting, is a praise of the Devi in that was perhaps not understandable for those who don't know Trika. Now in Trika, the one universal iconography is the Trishula, means the Trishula, which symbolizes the three Shaktis, and then on top of the Trishula there is Kala Sankarshini, the supreme Kali, and it is represented in it is called Trishula Abja Mandala, the mandala of the lotus and the trident. So the Trishula always symbolizes, there is the one, how do you call that? Shaft. The shaft, which is of course the unity, and then the three are the three Shaktis. The shaft also symbolizes, of course, as we have seen yesterday, the Sushumna, or the Madhyanari. The illustration is here. It's in my book, but I didn't bring my German book, so it would be easier to find. I don't know if you can see. Trishula Abja Mandala.
This isn't the usual
It's a
Trishul.
simplified.
It isn't the usual Trishul that we see in the temples, the pointed one.
You see, everything is symbolic. See, if the Trishula in Kashmir Shaivism, because the system is called Trika, so there are three realities. So Trishula always symbolizes either Shiva Shakti Nara, or the three energies, Icha Jnana Kriya, or the three energies Para, 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 and Apara. So everything is threefold here. And the Trishula is always symbolic of, it's not a weapon of Shiva or anything like that, it's a symbol for the entire system. So it's on page 237. So this is what the Devi who is described in this verse is the Trishula, the three Shaktis in the three prongs of the trident, and the Supreme in the center, of course, and then the Kala Sankarshini above, which is not in that drawing, because it's not in this text, who is above this tree. So what we have heard from Alexandra on the first day about these 12 Kalis and so on, that is contained in these two verses which Swamiji explained, and in which he also gives the mantra of Para. Mantra of Para, and the three components of the mantra, which are again related to the Trishula and so on. So that's these two verses. So this was, I think, to complement what we have heard yesterday, but instead of just letting it pass without understanding, to have some better. So now we come back to our text as much as we are able to do. Now, Kshema Raja has divided the Spanda Kārikā into three, respectively 4 sections. Well, the 4th section consists only of 2 verses, and these 2 verses we have already read in the beginning. And so different commentators have divided into different sections because Vasugupta has not made any such division. And the first, he gives very beautiful names. The first section which we have completed is called Svarupa Spanda, the vibration of one's own true nature. Svarupa Spanda. And he calls the sections not chapter or anything but Nishyanda. Nishyanda means flowing out. It's a flow. Because Spanda is always something dynamic. Or if you want to have the book, you can have it.
Yeah.
This is where it starts. So we have completed the first flow, which is called Svarupa Spanda. And the second, Nishyanda, flowing out, he has called Sahaja Vidyodaya Spanda, the vibration of the rise of the natural or spontaneous wisdom. The beautiful title, Sahaja Vidyodaya Spanda, the vibration of the arising of the spontaneous knowledge or wisdom. And it indicates, of course, the whole approach to. Now, before we proceed, I think it's still useful to revise where we have ended the last part. And here, just to summarize the last 3 verses. Thank you. Now, a little bit addition from what Swamiji says about this. The examples given in verse 22 about anger and extreme happiness, intensive states, etc. Swamiji says it's not only when these actually happen, because then you have a sudden experience of that, but even when you remember them. So remembering such intense states also brings you back to that spanda. And what happens at that time, then his breath stops altogether and it returns in sushumna. And this is at that point. At that moment, it enters in the central vein at once. When he just thinks of that intensity of joy, anger, etc., his breath stops and his breath enters in the central vein. So this is to complement. Now here, because the question was, the Chemaraja says in the heart, from the heart. No, it's not only Chemaraja, it's a text. But it is equally, it can happen in Muladhara, Swamiji says, which we know, of course. It can happen either at the level of Muladhara or at the level of the heart. So these are all different experiences, so there's no absolute uniformity. I mean, the Tantras give us like a landscape, like a map of the spiritual experience, and then in that map you will find where your experience is situated. And so that may be situated at Muladhara or at Hridaya. But certain things are definitely universal, are generally accepted in all by all schools. And then there are variations according to tantras, according to masters, according to traditions, etc.
When you are saying it happens in Muladhara or heart, are you saying that the breath stops there?
The breath stops when it enters into the central vein.
That's right.
Stops doesn't mean that you die.
No, that's right. It goes from that.
But
You're saying it happens in Muladhara or heart. Means what is happening there?
it happens.
It's merging.
You said it happens in Muladhara or in heart.
Yeah.
So what is that happening?
What is happening? We have done this in the Vijnana Bhairava there, Ajir, very intensely. That if you want to go back to Vijnana Bhairava, we can do it. In Vijnana Bhairava, there is a whole development from verse 26 to 26, 27. 28, 29. And out of these 28, 29 are concerned with Kundalini rising, and 26 and 27 with the centering of the breath. So 26, the energy of breath neither moves out nor enters. I have already modified my translation. When the center unfolds by the dissolution of thoughts, then one attains the nature of Bhairava. The center unfolds by nirvikalpa, and that we have discussed it before you came. Is it that the vikalpa cease because you enter into that center, or do you enter because the vikalpa cease? So it is a very, very, you can only distinguish in your own experience what is first and what is second. But they are definitely intimately related. So the cessation of thoughts, the entering into the center, the overcoming of the duality of prana apana, these are all very closely connected. And it is, that is described in 26. Well, 27 actually goes back a little bit to more hatha yogic pranayama, which, but then the progress of this is in 28, and that is then the rising of the Shakti from Muladhara. And what we said yesterday, getting subtler and subtler. Sukshmat sukshma taratmikam. Amulat kirana pasam sukshmat sukshma taratmikam. See, from the mula and like rays of light becoming more and more subtle until they dissolve in the Dvadashanta, which means either here or beyond. And that is not safe, but it depends on the level of the yogi. So you can go back to Vijnana Bhairava. And the beauty of the description at the end of the first Nishyanda is that getting dissolved in the great ether of consciousness, Mahavyoman. This is such a wonderful expression, Mahavyoman. Mahavyomni Pralina Shashibhaskare, where the sun and the moon dissolve. The sun and the moon are prana apana, and of course there are many other interpretations, the subject and the object, and so on. But the direct meaning is the two breaths.
Is it similar to Chidakasha?
Yes, it is Chidakasha. It is Chidakasha. It is the same. I mean, only the word is different. And we had before this expression, which is maybe not in the text, but in Kshemaraja, Mahavikasa Vyapti. Now this Vyapti is a very important stage in the yoga of the school. Means when you reach that stage of transcending the duality, that is pervasion. That state of pervasion. And then there is still beyond Mahavyapti. Shiva Vyapti also. But I don't know whether they are in the sequence. Shiva Vyapti, Mahavyapti, are they the same? I think so.
First Satma Vyapti. Atma Vyapti.
Atma Vyapti, but that is below Maha Vyapti. The Silvan has a very beautiful thing about this Vyapti, stages of Vyapti, pervasion. And when you think of the 5 pranas, of course, Vyapti, that corresponds to Vyana. So who can tell the 5 pranas?
Apana,
Apana, Vyana, Samana.
Samana, last.
Udana.
Apana, prana,
Apana prana,
Udayana,
Udana,
and the last.
Udana, Samana, Vyana.
Vyana.
Yeah. So Vyana is the pervasive, that pervading power of energy of breath, and that corresponds to Vyapti and pervasion. Okay, now we come to the second. I am not reading the introduction of Chemaraja, but I'm just summarizing. What he says is, according to him, as I say, the division is made by Chemaraja, not by Vasugupta. The first section was devoted to Nimilana Samadhi, to introverted practice of Samadhi. And the second section to Ummilana Samadhi means to the integration of the universe. Vaishvatmya Unmilana Samadhi Prativijneyam Yuktitaha. So all the words he uses are very, very appropriate. It is yukti, we had udyoga, udyukti. And Vaishvatmya means the universal state of Ummilana Samadhi. And both are related to Prativijna, means recognition of the Prativijna in the first section of the Nivilana, of the introverted state, and then recognition of the extroverted or universal, not extroverted, extroverted is wrong, universal state, Vaishvatmya. And then he gives a kind of, he's very systematic, he gives a kind of survey, like you give in your, when you write a book, you give a survey of the chapters which are going to, the content, table of content, so to say, but to compare the two sections. And then he, because this second part is related to universal aspect, he has to speak of the entire cosmic expanse of the 36 tattvas. And there he says, which those who know the Shaiva cosmology, they know that there are these two levels of the 36 tattvas, the pure way, Shuddha Attvan, pure, yes, Shuddha Attvan, and the impure way, Ashuddha Attvan. And the impure Ashuddha Attvan, it goes from Prithvi, from the earth, up to Maya. So Maya is the limit. And the pure way starts from Shuddha Vidya, from the pure wisdom, pure knowledge. Shuddha Vidya up to Shiva. So this whole hierarchy is what constitutes the entire universe.
So when you say earth to Maya,
earth to Maya, earth is lower than Maya.
You see, hierarchy always means there is, it goes from, every time they say from earth to Shiva. So that the entire gamut of the 36 tattvas is contained between from earth to Shiva. So well, you have just to see the list, then because it's a very complex system. So there are groups of 5 and so on, which we know from Sankhya. 5 elements, 5 tanmatras, 5 indriyas, and so on and so on. So why do we say prapancha? Prapancha because they are groups of 5s. So this external world, they consist always, why do we have 5 fingers, 5 toes? Everything is 5-fold. And 5 elements, 5 tanmatras, 5 senses, 5 organs of action, 5 organs of knowledge, etc.
What does earth mean?
Earth is not this physical element. Earth means the principle of earth. And that is, the principle of earth means the element of solidity. Then if you take water, the element of liquidity. Water doesn't mean just only water. It means everything that is liquid. Like in Ayurveda, the great part of the body is water. So this is all the water element. It's not the physical element, but the principle, the quality.
And the solidity is jadatva. Jadata.
The earth. It's not jada. There's no jada, even water may be jada, but in the Pradeshika Vivarana, he goes into the qualities of the tattvas and how they are mutually dependent. It's all mutually dependent. See, there is no earth without water, etc., etc., etc. So it's all integrated. But still, in order to understand the structure of the universe, you have to distinguish in a kind of hierarchical.
And why didn't you say Shiva's the end and not Ishvara Tattva and Sadashiva Tattva? And why didn't you finish with Sadashiva Tattva and not with, you finished with Shiva, huh? So pure means from Maya to Shiva.
Not from Maya, from Shuddha Vidya.
From Shuddha Vidya to Shiva. And not Ishvara Tattva and Sadashiva Tattva you included.
No,
so
why
is not this the end?
They are all in the pure way.
They are also included in Shiva.
They are all in the pure way. I mean,
Up to Shiva.
Huh? Up to Shiva. Up to Shiva. But Shiva, not the transcendent the divinity. Shiva as a tattva. So that we have to be very clear. I mean, I don't want to give a whole lecture on the tattvas because it's a very big subject. And those who are not familiar, I would recommend Swamiji's. Swamiji is always very brief but very concise. Kashmir Shaivism Secret Supreme, he has a chapter on the tattvas where he gives the list also. See, when you say that the 36th tattva is Shiva, that does not mean anuttara or anything. It means as far as you can categorize. You categorize, these are categories. When you can objectify, if you worship Shiva in a murti, in a linga or something, that is Shiva Tattva. It's not Shiva. So this distinction is very important because when they speak sometimes of the 37th Tattva, but it's not a Tattva. It's not a Tattva, it's just beyond the 36. Okay, but this is only because of the cosmic description of the cosmos that we have to speak on that. Otherwise, we are not concerned with the tattvas here.
What is the etymological root of tattva?
It's very easy. Tat-tva. Tat means this, and thisness.
Thisness.
Tva is an abstract suffix. Thisness. So anything which is this height, das height. So it's both a reality and a principle and a category or so what you can point at, that. So in the Upanishads, if you remember, there are many passages where Om Tat Sat. You say there's nothing in Tat, only that to which you point. Tada Kramya Palam Mantra. So in Jaidev Singh's book is 110. Tada Kramya Palam Mantra Sarvagnya Balashalina Pravartante Adhikaraya Karanani Iva Dehinam. So these two verses go together. Tatraiva Sampaliyante Shantarupa Niranjana Saharadaka Chittena Tenayate Shivadharmina. So we are not talking here of tattvas, we are talking of mantras. Let me see. So in Mark's translation, because he follows the other commentaries, the counting of the verses goes through. It is not section 1, 2, and so on. So here in his translation, verses 26, 27. Seizing that strength, mantras endowed with the power of omniscience perform their functions as do the senses of the embodied. It is there alone that they, quiescent and stainless, dissolve away along with the adept's mind and so partake of Shiva's nature. Now, I was so struck, when I read this passage of that anonymous guru yesterday. It's exactly the same. They dissolve away into the quiescent. In Jaidev Singh's, resorting to that power, the divinity's mantra, etc., together with sacred formula, which serve as the indicators. Now I'm explaining what difference he's making here. Being endowed with the power of omniscience, proceed to carry out their assigned functions towards the embodied ones, just as the senses of the embodied ones, by resorting to the power of Spanda, proceed to carry out their specific functions. Now, the difference in the translation of Jaidev Singh is that he takes, following Kshemaraja, he takes mantra in two meanings. Now, mantra, we have the sacred, powerful word, and mantra as subjects, as divinities. And this is a very complex subject. Now, mantras are not only words, or we don't need to translate mantra in that sense at all, because it is well known. But mantras are also perceivers. So there are levels of, this is a little complicated, and then there's a very nice Kriya Shakti by Swamiji in the book Kashmir Shaivism. 7 levels of pramatas. Pramata means perceiver or subject. And they start from mantras, mantreshvara, mantra maheshvara, and so on. Here it's 7 states of the 7 perceivers in Swamiji's book. So no, he doesn't start here from the lower level. He starts from the level of mantra. There is a lower level, of course. I'm not talking about the lower level, Sakala, Pralayakala, Vijnanakala. If this thing sounds very complex and complicated, the point of this list of the 7 pramatas is that they are levels of consciousness. And they are not mythological beings, these mantras, mantreshvaras, but they are, when the yogi advances from the state of individuality, Sakala, to the state of Shiva, he goes through these different stages. And these are the 7 stages. And mantra is where actually that spiritual experience starts. Sakala, Pralayakala and Vijnanakala, that these are still the lower stages. But the other commentators, they take mantra here only in the sense of formula, only in the sense of the sacred word. So that is why Akshi Maharaj's commentary is a bit more complex, because he takes these 2 levels of mantra. And both meanings of mantra, they are endowed with omniscience, Sarvajna. Sarvajna Balashalina, they are endowed with the power of omniscience. That's why mantras are powerful, because they are omniscient. They are Sarvajna Balashalina. And when he says tat akramya bala mantraha, tat means, of course, Spanda. So mantras are deriving their strength from that Spanda, from that what we have in the last few Kārikas. And they perform certain functions. Now we know mantras perform functions, and we have mantras which perform very low functions. You can have black magic with mantras, or white magic, or you can have the supreme highest transcendent meaning of mantras which lead you directly to moksha.
What's black magic and white magic?
Well, black magic if you want to kill somebody or to want to destroy something, or white magic if you want to help somebody or you want to heal somebody. So these are all performed by mantras. We know all these so-called tantrics in India, they are using mantras for all this.
Especially in Varanasi.
Uh-huh.
Especially in Varanasi.
And they work? A mantra to kill somebody? They work.
They work, of course. If they wouldn't work, then they would have given up long ago.
No more customers.
Huh?
No more customers.
No more customers? Oh, there's so many customers.
No, if they didn't work.
Oh, yes.
Customers are on increase.
On the increase, yeah.
I think Milarepa is a classic example.
Huh?
Milarepa, the Tibetan yogi,
Yeah.
who wants to take a revenge on his uncle, who appropriated all his father's property. So he practiced black magic, and he killed, I think, either 18 or 21.
35.
35. And then he realized it was wrong. Then he went to the cave and then he started
Yeah, of course, he did.
So it works. I mean, at least the.
So it worked in both ways for him. He destroyed the whole village, you know.
Where was this?
There is a
But does they work up to the level of death, like up to the level of getting harmed or getting people sick, but up to the level of death?
Of course. So, I mean, I live in Banaras. Banaras is full of these things.
Says Taiwan.
I think Bengal should also be full of these things. Bengal.
But yeah, Bengal, yeah. She knows better about Bengal. I mean, many
There
parts
must
of
be
India.
mantras to protect yourself also. There must be mantras to protect yourself.
What's up?
To protect yourself.
Of course, these are all mantras. These are also mantras.
She's talking about the counter mantras.
So those who are specialists in mantras, whether black or white magicians or yogis or great yogis, they know that the power of mantra derives from that force. They may not give it the name Spanda, but they know that there is a force. Tat akramya balam mantra. Relying on that force, and that is the force not only of some physical, but it is the force of omniscience in the highest sense. Savajña bala shalina. And they perform their functions. Pravartanti adhikaraya. And these functions, they are compared to the functions of the senses in the embodied beings, as we had seen before. Tatraiva sampraliyanti, and this is so beautiful. Now we come really of the high level of mantra, and not these low levels. What we heard yesterday. Freed of all limitations of office after having performed their assigned duties, their denotation as particular deities having ceased. Because mantras, even the mantras which you pronounce, they are a kind of deities. They get dissolved together with the mind of their devotees in that very Spanda principle. Well, Spanda principle is not said here, but understood. Hence, they are of the nature of Shiva. Tenaite Shiva dharmina. Tatraeva sampraliyante. This tatraeva means there itself. It means from where they have risen, from where they have drawn their strength. There they get again dissolved. They again merge and get dissolved there. And they are of peaceful nature and spotless, niranjana. Shantarupa niranjana. So these are not magical mantras which I meant here. Saha aradhaka chittena. So they attain the peaceful state together with the mind of the practitioner. And therefore, they are of the nature of Shiva. That is precisely what we have read yesterday, that the mantra gets dissolved in that peaceful state, along with the mind, no?
The rhythm celestial.
Yeah, yeah. So if Kshemaraja says that the second section, according to him, concerns the universal aspect, then mantra is a very essential component of that universal practice of Spanda.
exactly is
So there is a long, yeah?
this?
Sorry.
What exactly is meant by the universal aspect of mantra?
Well, now mantra, we are only entering into that, that will come. Universal aspect in the sense that before the tendency was towards introversion. And although he has said that the Supra Buddha, he has to have both introverted and the universal state. But now he goes more into the universal aspect of the integration of all the external aspects into the internal. But he will come to that. Now, of course, Maharaja gives a detailed interpretation, and we don't need to go necessarily in all, because the only difficulty is about the 7 pramatas. Yes, he said, why? How can you say that mantras are omniscient, sarvajna? And he says the mantras, words used as mantras do not transgress the stage of the experient, even at the Mayic stage, and have no limitation in knowledge, like the body, Puryashtaka, etc. Therefore, their omniscience is perfectly justifiable. And he quotes the Spanda Kārikā. The ascertainment expressed in the form, this is a jar, is the power of the highest Lord, beyond name and form. It always shines as one with the I, and never as this. So this is a very general statement about language, but especially in the case of mantra, this applies. This matter has been explained at length. Ishvara Prativijñāna, the power of Maya shows itself in manifesting undiluted diversity, etc. Then just at the end, thus it is meant to be said that the Spanda principle is the substratum of the mantras, not only in their stages of manifestation and dissolution, but also as regards their functioning. Thus, in all the 18 divisions of the Shaiva Shastras, the Spanda principle has been declared to be the quintessence of the mantras. Now, the word Spanda will not be found very rarely, but the idea is where he says that they are all the agamas, all the tantras agree on this point. The substratum of mantras. And of course he goes into the use of mantra in initiation. The mantras serving as means of the acharyas who are occupied with initiation, resorting to the power of the Spanda principle, this laying hold of it as their life-giver, proceed with the mind of the devotees for performing the function of liberation and enjoyment. And after the bodies of articulate sound cease to exist and are hence purified, they are completely dissolved, that is, they rest. In this explanation, the phrase, with the mind of the devotees, should be joined with the previous stanza. They dissolve. Saha Aradhaka Chittena. And here, of course, who knows the Shiva Sutra? There is a Shiva Sutra, Chitta Mantra. The mind is the mantra. And this is very, very important. If we go into the depth of it, you know, there is no end. Chitta Mantra. The second measure starts with in the Swamiji's, it is 2-1.
2-1.
Chitta Mantra. So the commentary one has to see on that, and then this will throw light on this passage of Spanda Kārikā. The commentary is very long, so actually you have to. This is Swamiji's or Charusi?
Mark.
Acha, yeah. But this is not Kshemaraja. No, that's right, yeah. So there are two understandings of the mind, and both are divine. The first understanding is that the mind is the thought of a sacred word. The second understanding is that mind is the thought of a sacred aspirant who is treading on the sacred path. So to get away from this kind of magical understanding of mantra, one has really to go to mantra as a state of consciousness, as a state of, and that is why mantra is one of the pramatas, and mantra is the mind of the practitioner.
He quotes from Sri Tantra Sabha.
Yeah.
Okay. O dear one, just as a bird of prey glimpsing in the sky a piece of meat flung to it, quickly catches it with the speed natural to it, so should the best of yogis catch hold of the light of consciousness, Manobindu, just as an arrow fixed to a bow and drawn with great force flies forth. So beloved does Bindu fly forward by force of awareness, Ucharana.
Everybody understood?
No.
No. No, because I have the privilege, you know, of the mic. Yeah. Yeah, this is an example from the Tantra Sabhava. Just as a bird of prey, and a falconer, glimpsing in the sky a piece of meat, flying with it quickly, catches it with a speed natural to it. So it should the best of yogis should catch hold of the light of consciousness, just as an arrow fixed to a bow and drawn with great force flies forth, so the Bindu flies. Thus Bindu fly toward by the force of awareness. So this is an example how the mantra is. Well, and this is not the invention even of the Tantras, because in the Upanishads they say that Om is like, you have to hit it like an arrow pointing to the goal. So the same image is used, you know, and it is the mind, of course. It is the one-pointedness of the mind. The Chitta Mantra again means that one-pointedness of the mind is the mantra. It is that powerful word which achieves its goal. And what is more important is that from the Trikasara is this mantra is said to be the inherent nature, swasvabhava, of the power of consciousness. For by concentrating on it constantly, the yogi abides well established on Shiva's plane of being. It is by virtue of this that those yogis who apply their minds to yoga know the true nature of ultimate reality. Surprisingly, Chivaraja does not quote the Shiva Sutra, Chitta Mantra. Maybe he quotes it later.
Because it's normally in the Shiva Sutra that they're quoting this one.
No, but this is, Spanda Kārikā and Shiva Sutra are so close. I think let us stop here. And some of the books are here if you want to refer to the Shiva Sutra or something. The important thing is now we have the basis for understanding of mantra, and then it will unfold because the theme of mantra continues. And its connection with Spanda.
Can a person pick up any mantra, like whatever available?
No, that is always, the tantras are very clear about it, that is not at all allowed. And it doesn't make any sense, or it may have even negative consequences. And as you see, some mantras, most of the powerful and secret mantras, they are not expressed even. They are only in a code language. So unless you receive it from your guru, it doesn't make sense.